Hi all, Jacob Austin here from QS.Zone and welcome to episode 135 of the Subcontractors Blueprint, the show where subcontractors will learn how to ensure profitability, improve cash flow and grow their business. Today's episode is all about negotiation, specifically how subcontractors can negotiate subcontracts and commercial positions more effectively, stop leaving value on the table, and go into every deal with their eyes open. So let's dig in. Negotiation is one of those words that gets used a lot in construction and understood very little. Most subcontractors think of negotiation as what happens when the main contractor tries to chip your price at the end of the tender period and you decide how much to give away. That's not negotiation. That is capitulation with a conversation attached to it. Real negotiation, the kind that protects your margin, secures your cash flow and gets dangerous clauses out of your subcontract before you start, is a skill. And like every other commercial skill, it can be learned, practiced and applied on live jobs. I've been looking closely at what the best negotiators in the world consistently do, the behaviours, the preparation habits, the mindset, and what struck me is how directly all of it maps onto the commercial reality of subcontracting. So today, I'm going to take the most important insights from my research and translate them point by point into what they mean for you on your next subcontract negotiation. Before we get into the nitty-gritty on the behaviours, one framing point. When I talk about negotiation in this episode, I mean negotiation in the broadest commercial sense. Your subcontract terms, your price, your program, your scope, your risk position. All of this is negotiable. Most subcontractors act as though the subcontract that lands in their inbox is fixed. It isn't. It's an opening position. Everything in that document, every clause, every rate, every amendment was put there by someone who has more than likely expected it to be pushed back on. The question is whether you push back with skill and evidence or whether you don't push back at all. So, what do the best negotiators consistently do? I'll take you through some of my key findings and then I'll anchor each one to where it shows up in a subcontractor's context. Across every kind of negotiation, in every sector, 4 concepts come up again and again. Trust, value, time, and people. Not profit, not partnership, not contract. Those things matter, but they're the outputs. Trust, value, time and people are the inputs. So what does that mean for you? It means that before you walk into any commercial conversation with a main contractor, whether it's a tender debrief, a subcontract negotiation, or a mid-project discussion on a variation, you need to have thought about each of those 4 things. Who are the people involved and what do they actually want? What does value look like to both sides? Not just money, but program certainty, reduced admin, reliable delivery. How is time affecting both parties' positions? And is there enough trust in the relationship to have an honest conversation, or do you need to build it first? Get those 4 things right and the commercial mechanics become easier. If you get them wrong, then no amount of contractual argument is going to save you. A regular mistake that most negotiations see come to fruition is that negotiators say they want collaboration, but they behave defensively. This is really important, and it's one thing that my research has showed up really clearly. The vast majority of people going into negotiations generally and genuinely want a constructive outcome. And yet in practice they default to defensive, positional behaviour. Why? Because they assume the other side is going to be combative. So they preemptively protect themselves. You see this play out in subcontracting all the time. You assume the main contractor is going to reject your claim, so you don't submit it in full. You assume they won't move on the LAD rate, so you don't ask. You assume payment terms are fixed, so you sign without questioning them. Every one of those assumptions costs you money, and a lot of them are wrong. Main contractors expect subcontractors to push back on certain terms. When you don't, they assume you've accepted them, and legally you probably have. To change that, you need to shift your mindset a bit. This means going in to conversations with the main contractor expecting a negotiation, not a confrontation. The two things aren't the same thing. And another thing that's abundantly clear in cross-industry research is that people underestimate preparation. Be it experienced or inexperienced negotiators, they go into negotiation without knowing their costs, without knowing their own constraints, or what they would and wouldn't trade. They go into it with little to no curiosity about what the other party actually needs. And in construction, the preparation gap can be severe because program pressure is always pushing you to get to site quickly. Preparation for a subcontractor means knowing some key facts about your price, your actual cost breakdown and where your margin is, identifying the clauses in the subcontract that represent the biggest financial exposure, knowing which of those you'll accept, which you'll push back on, and which is a genuine red line. And you also need to know what the main contractor's pressure points are. Are they margin squeezed on this particular contract? Are they hard pushed on the program? Have they had subcontractor failures on different packages? That intelligence coming out of your preparation will change how you negotiate. 5 minutes and a quick skim through isn't enough. This needs to be, for a significant subcontract, at least an hour's work, and you'll see real value from that hour's work. A key area to research and to know is around the mandate, not just of yourself, but the person across the table from you. Negotiations around commercial terms can either collapse or drag on unnecessarily if the person sitting across the table doesn't have authority to agree anything. Then they're just presenting an hard line, refusing to budge against a position. They're not making a decision. That means at times, deals can look like they're agreed and then get reopened by legal teams, a commercial director, or some head of procurement who's never been in the room with you. And that's a key piece of information from your point of view. When you're negotiating a subcontract, can the person across the table actually sign off on a change to the terms? If you're dealing with a site manager who's got no commercial authority, you might think you're negotiating, but it just isn't happening. He might not even take notes. At best, he's logging down what you're saying and passing it along to somebody to deal with a filter applied. And when we're speaking of mandates from your perspective as a subcontractor, what you need to do there is align your position before negotiation starts. It's no good sending a contracts manager to a pre-start meeting that agrees a position that your director then refuses to sign up to when the subcontractor is sent out to him. This kind of situation damages relationships before the job even starts, and it weakens your negotiation point because it can spoil the trust. Trust isn't a soft and fluffy concept in negotiation. Research across the board shows that high trust negotiations produce significantly more value for both parties than low trust negotiations. The mechanism is straightforward. When the trust is there, information flows more freely, people get more creative about solutions, and less time is spent defensively maneuvering around an issue, instead trying to find a solution. Where there isn't trust, every conversation can feel like a chess match, and it becomes tiring. And value doesn't get generated in the conversation, in the process. For subcontractors, this means your commercial reputation is a negotiating asset. A main contractor who trusts you to deliver, to flag problems early, to be straight in your commercial dealings, will negotiate with you differently than one who doesn't. That trust is built over time, but it starts early in how you conduct yourself in negotiation itself. To develop it, you need to be straight, quantify your positions, generate records and evidence that back you up. Don't overstate your claims, and if you say you're going to do something, then do it. That trusting behaviour compounds over the period of a project, and it produces a relationship, a rapport, that opens commercial doors, that posturing and positional tactics will slam closed. Now, here's a really important insight, and I think this is the most practical for you to listen to and take away as a subcontractor. Most subcontract negotiations focus on a really small number of things. Around the price, around the payment terms perhaps. But what the best negotiators do is expand the number of issues, of variables that they're playing with. When you've got more moving parts on the table, there's more room to find a deal, to find a trade. You can give on something that costs you little, but matters to the other side, in exchange for something that matters to you. In a subcontract context, your variables include price, payment terms, retention percentage, retention release date, LAD rate, and a cap to that, float in your program, scope definitions, design liability, notice periods, and of course those wonderful amendments to the standard form that the main contractors love to trot out. Most subcontractors will negotiate one or two of those, like I said before, price and payment terms. By negotiating across all of these areas at once, you can generate that give and take scenario, concede on a few points strategically to land the best overall position rather than winning on one point and losing 7 others. Negotiation is both a skill and a behaviour, and neither of those is fixed. There's a persistent myth in construction that some people are just naturally good negotiators, born with a gift of the gab, comfortable in confrontation, able to hold a position under pressure. That's often not how it works. Effective negotiation is a combination of technical knowledge and creative thinking. These are things that can be developed. If you find commercial negotiations uncomfortable, that discomfort isn't a personality trait. It's just a gap in skill and a gap in confidence that closes with practice and preparation. You generate confidence by repeatedly doing things. The way to build that is to start with the lower stake conversations, a minor scope query, a small program extension. Build the confidence, build the muscle memory before you need to put it to use on a high stakes deal. Another thing that is abundantly clear is that face-to-face conversations still matter the most. With the abundance of technology that everybody is using these days, a lot of modern conversations are had over email or on a Teams call and occasionally by phone. It might be efficient to do that, but it's also cold, and particularly email is a really bad medium for negotiation to take place, particularly if negotiation gets stuck, where the trust has broken down, or when the stakes are particularly high and nobody wants to move. Emails strip out tone, body language, and that human dynamic that can resolve difficult conversations. Video calls are better, but they're still limited. There's still something missing from being able to sit across the table and look somebody in the eye. So the best negotiators use face-to-face meetings deliberately. When a claim is going nowhere over email, request a meeting. Get in the room. Work on that rapport, that relationship. When relationships with a main contractor are under pressure, have the conversations in person. This costs time, travelling each way, sitting around the table and having that conversation, making the small talk. But it produces results that months of email correspondence won't do. It also gives you the ability to read the room and the person. Some people talk about emotional intelligence as if it's some kind of concept invented by management consultancy, but it's actually a practical commercial tool. When you're sat in the room, you're able to read the person, see their reactions, to see what moves them, to see what makes them draw inwards and fold their arms. This is giving you the clues about what the person actually wants as opposed to what they're just saying. You can see when tension is building up in a difficult conversation and manage that so that it doesn't become too adversarial. Being able to pick up on those cues is something that you learn by getting in that room, by having those conversations. And it can be what separates genuinely good outcomes from strings of outcomes with occasional wins, but a lot of damaged relationships. As a subcontractor, if you can read what the main contractor's QS is signalling as they're speaking, you might be able to glean things like, are they under program pressure? Is there a payment dispute upstream and that's making them defensive? Have they already tried to negotiate this package with another supplier and now they've come to you after failed negotiations elsewhere? You get to know these things by reading the reactions, seeing what makes their body language change, and then following up with additional questions. The context changes how they're going to negotiate with you, and it means you've learned information so that you can adjust your approach accordingly. And being flexible about your approach is one of the keys to being successful, because if there's one common insight that is evident across the board in all industries, it's that every negotiation is unique. So you can't keep repeating the same tactics. Negotiations are complex. They vary due to context. Demands on one project may be completely different to demands on another, even if the scope is exactly the same. And that means the tactics aren't fully repeatable. There's no script that you can pull out of the drawer and it works every time. What does work though is a combination of solid preparation, understanding what you want to get out of the negotiation before you go into it, having clear parameters, a clear mandate to work within, and going into the negotiation with genuine curiosity about the other side, and the flexibility to adapt your approach to suit what you find out. Sometimes the conversation will go somewhere unexpected. You'll find that golden nugget, what Chris Voss calls the black swan, the single piece of information that everything hinges on. It's like finding out that somebody that you're buying a house from is absolutely desperate to sell because they've got a job starting abroad. And they're not really worried as long as they make a minimum price about how much they sell it for, as long as they get the deal over the line by a particular date. Getting the deal done might be worth £50,000 to £100,000 to them. But if you never unearth that fact, because you don't go into the conversation with curiosity and build the rapport enough so that the information flows freely from them, then you never get the best that you possibly could out of that deal. So for subcontractors in practice, that means treating every subcontract negotiation as its own exercise. The main contractor, with the same QS you dealt with last year on a different project, is a completely different commercial animal. He's got different pressures. The bid hasn't got as much money in it. He's got a different team and a different set of priorities. So the key thing is to know your positions, know your variables, know your red lines, but stay curious, stay flexible, and work within what you can move on. So I've spoken a lot about theory. Let's try and look at an example that puts some context around it. Let's say a specialist facade subcontractor is invited to negotiate a large subcontract on a high-value commercial development. The main contractor sent over what's essentially a bespoke subcontract. It's JCT based, but it's so heavily mended that it may as well not be. Somewhere in the email there's a note saying that the terms are largely standard and they're keen to get started. The subcontractor's commercial manager spends half an hour reviewing it and flags up that the liquidated damages rates are particularly high, and he sends a one-line email back asking if that can be reduced. The main contractor sends a one-line email back saying no. The subcontractor signs. Then on site the program slips because the employer's dilly-dallying over design changes and the usual design and build issues. The facade package is directly impacted. The subcontractor submits a loss and expense claim. That claim gets rejected. The relevant matter that would have let them claim loss and expense has been deleted in the amendments. But also, a time bar clause that they hadn't spotted means that the notice they served 2 weeks after the event wasn't valid, because they needed to submit it within 7 days. The LAD rate, which they tried and failed to negotiate, is now running up, and they're on the hook for big money for a delay they didn't cause. Every one of these issues and outcomes was visible in the subcontract words before they signed it. The key thing that was missing was adequate preparation. A half an hour skim through just isn't enough on a big package. So many variables could have been picked up on, and they've been missed. A one-line email has been sent. That's not a negotiation. Negotiation for you as a subcontractor needs to be a commercial process, not just a couple of phone calls or a couple of emails raising a couple of issues. Before you engage, prepare properly. Know your costs and your exposure. Identify who's got authority on both sides so that the right people are talking to each other. And then expand the variables that you're talking about. Don't just negotiate price, but also talk about payment terms, retention, LDs, notice periods, that also critical amendment schedule. You might not win all of the debates, but you'll get a lot of mileage out of challenging the amendments. It gives you breathing room. It might give you a reason to increase your price because you're identifying risk areas within those amendments that the contractor doesn't want to hold themselves. They want to palm them off on you. But crucially, you've read them, you've identified them, and you can do something about it. You can say, look, I can't accept this for the price that I've submitted. If you genuinely need me to hold that risk, then you're going to have to pay more money for it. Build trust. This is best done over the course of repeat work. But if you don't have that opportunity, if you're negotiating first time with a new contractor, trust can be earned through how you deal with that negotiation itself. Be straight, be considered, quantify issues, follow through with what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. Quote when you say you're going to quote. Come back with comments on the terms when you say you're going to do that. Meet face to face to build that rapport. And that's a real crucial part. When the contract value is significant or the terms are genuinely dangerous to you, get in the room. A face-to-face conversation can resolve in an hour what email correspondence might have you going back and forth again for absolutely weeks. So the key messages that I think you should be taking away from today's episode are that negotiation isn't just about price. Include other variables in there. Raise the retention, the LDs, the program, the scope, and the amendments. Work across all of them. Give on some issues and take on others. To do that, you need to prepare. Preparation is the absolute biggest issue. You need to know your costs, your constraints, and what you absolutely can't put up with. And ideally, have an idea of the other party's likely pressures before you engage with them. You also need to know who's got authority. Negotiating with somebody who can't change a thing isn't worth the time it's going to take. So it needs the right people in the right room. If you've done that preparation, if you've picked out all those different variables, then you've got more room to position your negotiation as a collaboration, not a defence. As I said, most main contractors will expect some pushback on commercial terms. What you don't push back on, you accept. But by negotiating on more fronts, you build that collaboration. You demonstrate you're being reasonable by giving on some issues that aren't necessarily important to you. And you hold fast on things that genuinely mean something to you. Maybe you have to give on something important, but you get something in return through collaborating. Trust in a negotiation has measurable commercial value. How you conduct yourself in negotiations can either build or destroy that trust. And bad experiences can quickly destroy a reputation that you might have spent a long time building. So be protective of that reputation because it will follow you across every deal with that same contractor. Remember that face-to-face is the most effective. Emails can be efficient, it can be a useful starting point. I've got a few issues, I've listed them out on this email. It's a starter for 10. It's not effective for high stakes or stalled negotiations. Get in the room. Get face-to-face with somebody who can make decisions. And finally, every deal is different. Do your preparation, work within your parameters, and be curious about what the other side actually needs. By doing that and being flexible about your approach, you can come away with the best deal. So, take those points, apply them to your next subcontract that lands on your desk, and start negotiating like a true commercial operator. My mission with the show is to help the million SME subcontractors working out there in our industry. If you've taken some value away from today's show, then I really need your help. to share the show and pass that value on to somebody else who'd benefit from hearing it, so that I can help as many people as possible. And of course, subscribe yourself if you haven't already. And thanks for tuning in. If you like what you've heard and you want to learn more, then you can find us at www.qs.zone for more information. We're also on all your favourite socials, again at qs.zone. And remember, miss the contract detail and the commercial risk falls on you. Thanks all. I've been Jacob Austin, and you've been awesome.